We expect anything and nothing, so it's all right.
Yeah.
All right, I think that we
I
may.
think we got it.
I think we may continue. I don't know how we're
Beautiful.
going to top that. But here we are on the tuning fork. Tuning in. We're tuned in.
Great stuff.
God, Vera, it's been a while. An exciting reunion. Well, this is our 28th show, and we're here with Celeste Lecesne, and there's Emily Harris over there, our producer. We have a sort of vague background here. We're experimenting with a kind of impressionistic technology, and I'm sorry about the unusual technical delights of the day. But since we're exploring identity and letting go and experimenting, I guess we all passed the first step. We've done it. You know, years ago when Celeste and I met, I think it was in a yoga seminar, and it was 1982, in either this month or September. So that's nearly 39 years ago, I think.
Incredible.
Yeah, and I'd been studying yoga in Venice, Italy, and Celeste came over and visited one time. I wasn't in my apartment, so I missed him. But he left me a beautiful gift. I was very touched. Just give you a little bit of background. Jumping ahead, I think, to, God, I don't remember what year it was, but I was on Carol Bavozo's show Letters on WBAI. We talked about setting up a series of cultural residences for artists and creatives where they would travel around the world to various locations where they would live among cultures and integrate these cultures into their cultural expression so that those cultures would be preserved with somehow within the integrity of an artwork or a science paper or whatever the creative project was about. And in that way, we would circulate culture through art, world culture. So we called it the International Indigenous, what was it? International? Oh, the Intravenous Museums, that was one name, and the International Vernacular Museums. And believe it or not, we were just with Margaret a few months ago in her hometown, and we talked about perhaps setting up a residency there for artists to visit occasionally and to reanimate or revive that project, which was, in fact, well, Carol Bavozo and Celeste and I did a lot of heavy lifting to get an exhibition together. Do you remember, with Andy Warhol, who gave us 2 large drawings in pencil of Mao Zedong? And we went to Les Levine's loft, and he gave us some art. And I think not Tom Wesselman, but another sort of pop, sort of billboard type painter. It was Wesselman, yeah. So just to sort of tune in a little bit with Celeste and I, and Emily and I recently attended a performance of Celeste's called Poof. And it was interesting because, the audience were sort of introduced to very challenging ideas about the world, about identity. I'll leave it up to Celeste to talk a little bit about it, but in this apocalyptic age, and I dare to say if this is not an apocalypse, I don't know what an apocalypse looks like. But in this age, this wood fairy that sort of emanates from the spirits of nature and of maybe the artificial intelligence of, or not so artificial, the natural intelligence of our collective wishes, our collective hopes, our altruistic spirit and nature has sort of manifested through this character. Maybe Celeste will tell us a little bit about that character and sort of discuss a little bit about how we're kind of all accountable for our destinies. And that seems to, in some way, be this kind of empowerment that comes at the end of the performance where we all sort of, in a sense, chant together or sing together. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about how that manifested this spirit, this character, this creature that you are.
Well, thanks, and thanks for having me on your program.
Oh, really?
I'm so happy to be here, and I just love our long journey. I think one of the fun things about getting older is to see who travels with you through your many permutations that you go through as an artist, right? And as you you kind of shed a skin, and then you realize, oh, that person's still there. And it's so incredible to me that here we are all these years later. So I just want to say that. And the other thing I want to say is how much delight I get when people say the word poof. Every time I hear somebody say, and Celeste is performing in a piece called Poof, I just think it's just the most delightful thing in the world, just to make people say that word. Because for me, poof is really just like it's such a beautiful word, and it contains both the possibility of appearance, but also the possibility of disappearance, like that, right? And really, the piece came about. I was sitting with a group of activists, and I asked them if they had hope for the human species, if they thought that the human species could actually make this incredible turning that is really required of us in order for us to survive as a species, but also to not do away with all the other species on the planet. I don't know if you all saw the news today, but the British Environmental Agency came out and made a report to the UN basically saying that we as people would have to either adapt or die. And it's such a stark, whoa, and we've never lived as a species with a horizon line. We've just never lived with a horizon line. And we have to figure out a way to be able to hope beyond what we can see. Because I was so shocked when I talked to those activists and they didn't have hope that human beings could actually make this pivot. They all said no. It said they didn't.
Activists, Celeste, who were the? I mean, you don't have to name names, but in general, what were their sort of areas of activism?
People who are working in the, in terms of standing up for the earth, standing up for indigenous people, standing up for women, standing up for queer people. Like, there are people who are on the front lines of activism, and to me, the thing that unites or should unite all of us is this desire to be able to survive past our ability to hope. We have to find it in ourselves, to find something to believe in, to hope. So I created this piece. It's basically a fairy, which I am, but really like a fairy, like in a fairy costume and everything, coming out of the woods. And I was invited by this theater in the Hudson Valley to write this piece and perform it. And I came out of the woods. There were, we did it outside for about maybe 25, 30 people at a time. And I basically challenged them to hope and gave them a magic spell that I made up, but that I really believed would be helpful. And speaking of Buddhism, I based it on this quote by Shakyamuni Buddha. And he said, the world arises through the tip of intention. And I thought, this is what we don't have as a people. We're not at the tip of intention. As a group, or even for our own personal lives often. So I just wanted to gather everybody at the tip of intention for this world we live in, right? For this beautiful, numinous, natural world that we live in, to get everybody with this intention of like, let's not destroy this. Let's actually honor and love this, even though we don't know how to. So, and it's so much fun to perform as a fairy. I feel like it's my childhood self, being given the permission to just be the person that I always really thought I was when I was a child.
So when you were performing, did you feel childish?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I think, one of the great things about being a performer in lifetime is that it really is just play. And one of the things that I love to play with as a solo performer are other people's imagination, right? Is to be able to find a way to be able to excite their imagination so that they actually become the other actor. They become the set designer. They become, they just use their imagination to help me along. And we create something together. It's not me doing it alone. It's me just exciting the insides of their brain so that we do something in unison.
Now, I hope it's not intrusive or inappropriate, but
not possible.
Yeah. Could you just perhaps occupy the performance for a few moments and do a few of the lines from it?
Oh, wow.
I got him.
Yeah, you did. You got me.
Mills just came in, and saying hello to Mills there. And Ivy, I suppose they're out there somewhere. Yeah. So
hi.
Yeah. Right.
Welcome to our party.
All right.
We could do this right now. Are you ready? That's how it starts. That's what I say to the Aussie girl, or maybe she's a Kiwi. In any case, her accent is from down under there somewhere. She's a student at the college where I've been asked to speak, a person in the process of becoming, a senior about to be unleashed out into the impossible and unsuspecting world, an actor. Now, to be perfectly honest, I hadn't been planning on doing this spell. I'd never cast a spell in public before. So it wasn't something I'd been planning. I didn't wake up that morning in my little fairy cottage at the edge of the woods and think to myself, yep, today's the day. Today's the day I travel into the city and stand in a fluorescently lit classroom and reveal myself a fairy. Anyway, basically the whole first part of it is actually how I came out as a fairy in a college, in a class. And I actually performed a spell on this young woman, this Australian woman. It was wild and audacious, and I can't believe I did it. But I did it. You must be thinking, who is this crazy person? This crazy person is a fairy, is really.
So we have a request from Gianna already. You see, people, they're so rowdy here in this group. She came right out and asked if you could perform a spell on us. Was that the question?
And he casts a spell on us.
Please.
Yeah. Sure. Shall I keep going?
Yeah.
An actor. She was. I didn't know her. I have to tell you the story because I didn't know her. I'd never seen her before. All I knew is that she was this would-be actor, just another would-be actor, willing to do whatever, to be seen in the light of who she believed herself to be. She wanted to know if any of us assembled on the panel had any experience with the whole visa situation. I'm time sensitive, she told us in her down under accent. I've only got a year after graduation to get myself working. And then if I intend to stay here in the States another 3 years, I've got to somehow establish myself as an artist of exemplary talent. And I'm just wondering, how does a person become an artist of exemplary talent? One of my colleagues, a woman wearing a too tightly fitted business suit and showing an overage of cleavage, offers to give her some advice. She promises to connect the young woman to an immigration lawyer, but I'm not thinking about that. I'm not hearing much of what's being said because that morning, my mind is elsewhere. You see, I just heard the news about the detention camps on the southern border. And though I'm standing in a room of would-be actors, I am a million miles away, thinking about the 2,432 children who've been separated from their parents, the 1,300 boys ages 10 to 18 who are being kept in cages, children who I imagine are also willing to do whatever to be seen in the light of who they believe themselves to be. And I have to admit that the news, it made me a little crazy. I'm a little not there. And there's a scream at the back of my throat, making me want to yell to everyone assembled, have you heard the news? Do you know what happened this morning? But I don't. I don't say a word. I just sit there listening to the Aussie girl as she talks about her dreams of becoming an actor. You really want me to go? Keep going? Anyway, what I did was I turned that young girl into an artist of exemplary talent that day, in front of everybody. I gave her the permission to be an artist of exemplary talent because really it's what we all are waiting for. The permission to be who we really think we are, right?
Well, now,
so that was the first step.
Yeah. Do we have a choice? You know, I mean, do we have to wait? Can we wait for permission, or is this it? Like, you know, let's step up.
Yeah, I think we have to give ourselves permission and give each other permission, right?
All right. When Emily and I sat there in the forest with you, I know that both of our hearts resonated very much with what was happening because it was an expression of what we were designing and producing a project called Surfing the Apocalypse, which is a very similar sort of sensibility in terms of empowering the community in the culture of occasional utopian scenarios that are going on in the world, which do embody hope, perhaps. But at least, even if we disagree about the idea of hope, there is the idea of doing something. You know, that if we all do something, there will be a change.
And it's also, I think this is the moment for artists to actually make it happen inside people's hearts and minds, right? Because there's so much discourse going on in terms of like, you know, I mean, you don't need me to remind you what's going on out in the world, but it's everywhere, all of this chatter and I'd like to call it dialogue, but it just seems more strident than dialogue. And I feel like the artist, what we do is, you know, we just jump the track in terms of being able to awaken people to their own beingness, right? And you know, what makes us all human.
Really?
Or we have the capacity to do that.
Yeah. So Emily asked me to speak about my understanding of hope, your understanding of hope. What's your understanding of hope, Celeste? I mean, if
you know,
really, drill down into it. What is at its core?
I think, there's a beautiful quote by Václav Havel, playwright and also president of Czechoslovakia. Like, who else has got that on their resume? President and playwright. But
Bill Clinton played the saxophone.
Doesn't even hold a candle.
No.
But he says something, and I'm sure I'm gonna wreck it, but he says that hope is not the certainty that things will turn out well. It's not optimism. It's the certainty that what you're doing is worth doing, whether it turns out well or not. And I'm sure I'm making a mess of that quote, but I feel like we have to summon a kind of, well, I'll speak for myself. I feel like I've had to summon something within myself and marshal my artistic abilities to be able to express my concern for the world, but at the same time, really find a way to be able to express the delight that we, in terms of this challenge that's ahead of us. Who was it that said that the artist's responsibility is to make the revolution irresistible? But whoever said it, that's what I feel. And I just had to summon something inside myself to make the revolution seem irresistible and get people on board. So that was the purpose of my performance, was to actually make people, instead of making them feel like, oh, what can I do? This is so hard, to just ignite in them that delight they had in nature when they were children.
Right. Let's talk, if we can, for a moment about identity. And of course, we can reference, the Trevor Project, where we're challenged with a world where gender identity was not something that we could even sort of openly question or examine. Mm. And you did a performance, I don't know all the details, but one of the characters in a multi-character work that you did was named Trevor. And that was Trevor an expression of your own experiences?
Yeah, and in the early 90s, I started performing this show, and there was a 10-minute piece called Trevor about a 13-year-old boy who realizes he's gay and he tries to kill himself. And it was it's very poignant, and it was actually very funny as well. And it was made into a short film in 1995, and it won the Academy Award, which was an incredible thing. It was a 16-minute film, and it went on to be put on HBO. And when HBO agreed to show it, the director and the producer and I thought it would be a good idea to put a telephone number at the end of the film in case there were young people out there in their living rooms watching Trevor who could identify with the character. And there was no 24-hour suicide prevention lifeline specifically for LGBT youth. So we created it, and that was 23 years ago. That first night that the film was on TV, they got over 1,500 telephone calls from kids around the country, not all of them queer and not all of them in crisis, but all of them identifying with this, the idea of being different. And I think for me, it was such a profound moment in my life as a storyteller, where I saw how a story, 10-minute story, could actually could save a life, for one thing, and also went on to change the culture. Because, quite frankly, before, I'm sure you all remember, before the 1990s, there wasn't an idea that young people knew their gender other than what they were assigned at birth, or that they knew their sexuality, although we all knew this was true. And I just told my own story with Trevor. I changed his name to protect him. And, but I knew from my own experience how hard it was to grow up in a culture that wanted me dead or disappeared at least. And I thought it was criminal that the suicide rates for queer youth were 3 to 4 times the number of their heterosexual peers. I thought it was just criminal that nobody was doing anything about it. So I wrote that story about my own experience, never thinking that it would go out into the world. I was just performing in these little theaters in downtown Manhattan. And out of that experience, that part of the story, it just kept moving out further and further into the culture. And, now when I travel around the country and I meet a 30-year-old young person, well, they're young to me, who comes up to me and says, thank you. I wouldn't be here had I not seen Trevor on HBO when I was 15 years old and called that lifeline, right? I think that's better than any Academy Award. That's better than anything. And it taught me the power of story. It taught me how awesome stories can be in the lives of individuals.
But is it fair to say that you reinvented yourself as an activist at that time, or that your concept of your capacity expanding into this other dimension, which became a culture?
Yeah, and it was in a funny way, it's as if my 13-year-old self forced me into a life of activism, right? Like, I think it was always in my heart to do something about it, but it was really it was Trevor, who reached out to me as an adult and said, you have to do something about me. You have to tell my story. Don't not tell my story. And by doing that, he made me into an activist.
What motivated you to tell the story at that particular time? Was there something?
The
other aspect of it is that you changed your name.
Yeah, that came later. At the time that I wrote Trevor, I was living through the AIDS crisis in New York City, and many of my friends were dying. And of course, many people in the entertainment industry were dying all around me. And I just couldn't handle the fact that there was an entire generation that was dying of gay men. And at the same time, I heard this news on NPR about a study that they had done, one of the first, where they were able to identify the fact that homosexuality was the cause of death among so many young people. It's the second leading cause of death among young people ages 13 to 24. And I just thought it was insane that these two generations were dying off, and I was alive, and I just, it made me crazy, and I felt that I had to do something about it. And the only thing I could think to do about it was to tell my story, even though I didn't particularly want to. It wasn't something I was, it's hard to tell such a personal story, and it's also it was a taboo at the time for gay men to talk about young children, right? Like it was like nobody ever talked about it.
Yeah. So there's something urgent that causes this kind of metamorphosis in one's behavior as an artist, that there's a transformational sort of chemistry or whatever it is that compels us to overcome our fears.
Yeah, and I think it's a call. Like it's like almost like, when you hear about like, you get the call, like in a religious order or something like that. And I think that for many people, the arts are a kind of sacred trust, where you are being called to do certain things. And I certainly feel that whether it was being, from the outside or the inside, if there's any difference, I don't think there's any difference between the inside and the outside, but I was called to do something about that situation. much in the same way that I feel like I'm being called to do something about the environment right now. But in terms of changing my name, you know, so I started the Trevor Project in 1998, and I worked very hard to, you know, make that a going concern, as they say, and to get it into people's hearts and minds. And now it's a beautiful, you know, the largest it's the largest lifeline on, you know, on the planet, and it's really doing an incredible work. But I turned my attention about 5 years ago to this new generation of young people that are coming up, and because I just saw something that I'd never seen before in young people, especially queer young people, which was a kind of, it's just so beautiful. You know, they have a social justice component I'd never seen before. They have a sense of connection to each other, and also a deep connection to their own selves. They're exploring identity in a way that I've never seen anything like it. It's just so thrilling that they're breaking down all of the barriers, and, you know, like, they're just, everything's up for grabs. It's so amazing to watch them and to be in their midst. And so I got very turned on by what I was seeing, and I just decided that I was going to really devote my time to them. And I started traveling around the United States. I traveled for 3 years, going into schools for like a week and spending time with their GSA, their gay and gender alliance. And that, or I would go to an LGBT center and stay there for a weekend and do workshops, actually giving them the space and the encouragement to tell their stories. And, you know, they're so fluid. They kind of turned me on to my own identity, or that got maybe kind of paused when I was 12 or 13, when I realized it wasn't safe for me to be completely my fabulous self. And I had to turn down the volume a little bit and like kind of like go, you know, hide out under the radar. Because when I was growing up, that's what you did. You kind of like yikes, you know, and in order not to stand out or get beat up, or and I realized that I was being given an opportunity by being with these young people to reclaim that part of myself. And not to get too into the details of it, but Celeste was my middle name, a name that I was terrified that people would find out when I was, 13, 14, 15 years old. I was terrified that people would find out that my name was Celeste, my middle name, because it's obviously such a girl name. And I thought, I'm going to own this. And when I told the young people, because we had been working with them online in these Zooms for the past year and a half, we've been doing workshops with them online. Creative workshops, introducing them to queer artists, getting them to do all sorts of projects and making films and writing poems. And it was amazing. And so we became very close with them. And when I told them I had changed my name, they actually saw it as a kind of personal victory on their part. Like they were like, oh my God, like you we changed you. Hi, Gordon. Welcome. Anyway, that's how I came to change my name.
What is it about identity that is fluid? Because so much of our conditioning, culture, society, etc., is all about, developing an identity, a self-image, a role, and defending it and having opinions that express it. And I mean, what is it about identity that is actually fluid?
Well, I think it's one of the wonderful things about being around the young people that I work with is that they're experimenting like crazy. And whereas with my generation, it was really a situation where we came out, right? Like one day we were supposed to be straight. Everyone supposed, although whoever supposed I was straight, I have no idea. But but people supposed that I was straight, or I pretended I was. And then one day I said I came out as gay. it's a very different experience for these young people that I work with today, because they see it very differently. They're coming into themselves as opposed to coming out. They're slowly coming into themselves and trying on different identities and saying, like, I'm going to try this name, or I'm going to try these pronouns. And one of the beautiful things that happened during the year and a half we worked, through Zoom because of the pandemic, was that young people would come each week and they would put their name in the little box and they'd have a new name with new pronouns. And we would all go, oh, Pluto, how wonderful to see you. How are you feeling today? And Pluto could actually feel what it's like to be called Pluto using they, them, zir pronouns. And then the next week they'd come and go like, oh, Thesis, how wonderful to see you. And it became a kind of a laboratory for experimentation, which is one of the reasons why I think people are so uncomfortable around young people, is because they are so fluid with their identity. It's not fixed. And it made me feel like, wait, why does mine have to be so fixed? Right? Like, why can't it be a little more fluid?
Well, why don't we look at one of the animations that maybe you can just tell us what we're going to see. Vera, I'm so sorry, Vera. What your graphic image is out of focus. Itself out of focus.
It's okay. I just wanted to say to actually echo something that Celeste is saying. And this was a new group of students that I have. And one of the things I said in class to get them to get to know each other better and themselves was to just take this little figure. And it doesn't matter if it's you don't have to see it in detail. And to sort of put something about themselves in their feet, in their hands, in their heart, in their head, to introduce themselves to each other. And then I put them in groups of 3 to talk about and introduce themselves. And this guy immediately in the middle, he's got gay, sexuality, proud. This is, to me, the teacher day one. I'm getting this. And his other 2, his peers in his group. And it's just day one. It's just, that's it in the classroom, And for me, like, that's the first time that's ever happened in a way which is just so obvious and so kind of okay. And it's not like he looks gay that I would think, oh, he looks gay, he must be gay. There was nothing of that. It's just that, or as we expect, it's just that he wanted to say it and he wanted to share it and he felt he could.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful, Vera. And it's such a beautiful segue into these animations, because what we did was we interviewed these young people and came up with a 2-minute interview, like a story. And then we paired them with an animator who identified in the same way that they did. And we called the whole series How Life Is, because one of the people, as you hear, he says, it's no big deal. It's just how life is being queer for us. It's not like, and whereas in my generation, it was a huge deal. For them, it's like, like, this is just the way life is. Let's get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that. Such a great exercise. I'm going to steal that from you.
Well, I just was amazed. I would not have thought that anybody would have gone there, put anything sexual. And he just did straight out. And it was so, just like that. It was so natural as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like saying I have brown hair.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't notice you had brown hair. Now, should we show the cowl? Can we do that?
No, if maybe show Zion. Can you show Zion's? I'm
very confused because I know that I downloaded Zion. I'm so sorry.
Or you could show or whatever you've got handy. I can explain it. It doesn't take a lot of explaining. They're only like a minute.
Okay, we're going to share Cal's story.
Oh, Cal. Oh, yeah.
And here it is.
Beautiful.
I'm Cal. I'm from Spartanburg, South Carolina. I'm 18 and I'm Jewish. And I'm a trans guy, and I'm bisexual. Last summer, I went up to New York to see my family up there. Everyone ended up renting a cabin over on the lake together, and one day I got my aunt to drive me down to the corner store, and I grabbed pink, white, and blue streamers, and cake mix, and blue dye, and some sprinkles. No, actually, I got Smarties, so I used those instead of sprinkles. I put up my streamers, and I made my cake, and it was blue on the inside, and, I wrote, "It's a boy" on it. And then I gathered everyone in the kitchen and was like, "I'm trans, and you may now eat the cake." Oh, I also got a sparkly fedora and tipped it over and told them to write a name and put it in there. Most of them were jokes, and they were all very funny. Daisy wanted to do a ritual burning of the names that displeased me. Daisy's my sister. So that night we had a campfire, and if I really didn't like one of the names, we would throw it into the fire. One of Daisy's suggested names was Baby Eagle, and then also Twerk Master with a little booty drawn on it, and ASAP Rocky with hearts around it. Everyone was chill about it, and glad there was cake. I came to Kal because Kal-El is Superman's name, and yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. That's
So
Kal.
After our program, at some point later today, you're having a kind of workshop with the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Correct. What is that process like?
So, because of the pandemic, we weren't able to travel anymore. So we started doing these more intense online workshops, meeting them in their bedrooms. And, it's been an incredible experience because for a year and a half, we've been in the bedrooms of these young people who were exploring their identities, right? And with each other and themselves, and giving them the tools to be able to express who they are becoming. And like today, we're doing, in honor of Halloween, we're doing a workshop called What Scares You, in which we're going to, we always begin by having a conversation, a deep dive discussion about what are in this case, what is it that scares you about the world? Or what is it that scares you about who you are? Or what does it scare you about the future? And then we actually have them do a writing exercise, and then they share their work. And out of that work, sometimes we create these animations. We also have workshops. One of them is called the Queer Youth Guide to Living, where we give them the microphone and they basically teach people what they need to know about okay, stop asking me about pronouns. Here's what you need to know. Or stop asking me about why I need to have queer friends. Here's what. So they write it, they perform it, and then we animate it and put it together.
So okay, my idea, and I think I share the idea with Emily, is that, and in a sense, the Institute for Cultural Activism International has a lot to do with showing people that identity is quite plastic. It's quite fluid. In fact, Gianna here works with branding and identity and deconstructing, aspects of our behavior, things we wear, the way we speak, all these things. If we deconstruct all of these elements, we're sort of like this thing that's just very ephemerally glued together with all these different parts. And it's, I think we're in a time in history, and I think it's very fitting that our second season of the Tuning Fork sort of touches into this theme of identity, because we're all being challenged. I mean, even the pandemic was an opportunity to really find out, well, what really means the most to us. What are our priorities? What are our values? And what's the big deal about me? I'm me. we recognize that, our actions affect environment. Our thoughts affect our actions. And so if we bring those sorts of principles into the space of art making, and there's some intention to transform society through that work, then I think that's what we're sort of exploring as cultural activism.
And it's one of the things that we try to pass along to the young people, is that art is not just a distraction, right? It's not just a feel-good experience. It's a way to be able to communicate your vision of like one of the reasons we call it the Future Perfect Project is because we really believe that they are living in a future that hasn't yet arrived. That young people are uncomfortable in their own skins because it is not their world. It is a world they've inherited. And just like when I was 15 and people told me that homosexuality was a crime and a sin and a mental disease, I thought that was so fucked up. Like, I just thought that you got to be insane, like, if you really think that, because you're talking about my love. You're talking about how I love. And I just refused to accept. I didn't go around telling people, but I refused to accept it. And as I was with these young people, I thought to myself, well, of course, just like I was living in a world that hadn't yet arrived, it took 50 years for that to change. These young people are living in a future that hasn't yet arrived also. So I want to give them the tools to tell us what that future looks like. That is a form of activism, trying to communicate something so you can change the world, the outer world, to conform to your inner vision, right?
So this permission to be a new me all day long exists, to break out of our patterns, to occupy a space that's not defined, and that's unscripted and spontaneous, perhaps. And so, anyway, I think it may be a moment now to open up the panel a little bit for people to speak.
I was just thinking that.
With you. So, please, everybody, you're so generous being here. And what's this all about for you? And please interact with Celeste. Thank you. And welcome everybody again on Facebook and YouTube.
Well, I can say something. This was so beautiful. Thank you so much, Emily and John. Happy birthday, John. And Celeste. Yes. This was really, really beautiful to see you perform. I've been that girl, one in the 01, and I got the 01 for a long time. So I wanted to ask you, in a way, a practical, because it's like, how do we live in the magic in the day to day? And, we're spiritual beings in an earthly experience. So in a way, I feel all these labels of identities are ways for us to be able to hang on to spirit and to hang on to magic, to be able to connect, right, at the physical space, at the physical level. And where I'm going with my question is not just about gender. It's like, wouldn't it better be a world without borders, right? But at the same time, isn't that so beautiful that there is American culture, there's Panamanian, and there's Indian culture. So it's like, how do we live in this world to be able to have both? And specifically, because I feel that when we don't fully understand that ethereal quality of the new generation, there's almost like rejection or so much combativeness. So I guess I'm just throwing a lot of ideas because I would like them to react. It's not a specific questions, but yeah, how can we live in a borderless experience when we still have physicality?
Yeah, I can offer something that I've learned from these young people that has been so valuable to me. You know, people come to me and they say, why are there so many different types of genders and sexualities now? They're up, I think it's up to 80 something now, you know, of these different like breakdowns. Like if everyone is like, if we're evolving, why are there so many divisions within the queer community? And what I've learned is these young people are modeling for us what it looks like to be a community of such diversity that it is astounding. And a generation ago, we couldn't have imagined that we were already that diverse. But they're showing us, look, you can be a pansexual demi-boy, you know, but you know, you could have like a long explanation of who you are, and you can still live with somebody who has a different identity. They're modeling for us what it looks like to have a big tent and live under it with difference and diversity. And I think that is a beautiful thing for them to teach us just at the moment when they've had it with us in terms of like all these divisions. They're showing us how to live in community, at least the queer community as I see it. And you asked a really good question that I just feel like is something every artist tries to grapple with, which is how do we live in the magic day to day? I just saw Gordon's hand go up because he has the answer. I'm so happy somebody has the answer to that question.
Well, then I'll pause because I don't have the answer.
Oh.
So
None of us do. We're just doing it.
Well, at a practical level, it's like I can't remember everyone's gender if it changes every month, you know, or you know what I mean? It's so hard to not offend someone at a practical level because trust me, like I would love to be with my fedora right now in my, you know, in my different personas and right. But it's like, it's a little, so yeah, it's like, how do we make this practical to like even remembering pronouns, remembering names? So it sometimes
have curiosity and kindness. Those are two like very good things that I think are cross-culturally, they work really well. Curiosity and kindness. Like to say to somebody like, well, what's going on? Like, what's going on with you this month? Or like, what, you know, yeah, and people are very forgiving. I find that people, you know, online, not so much, but in real life, there's a lot of room for play.
Yeah.
At least that's been my experience. There's no shame in it. It's only if you make it about you. Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I really messed up. You know, like that's when it becomes problematic.
Thank you.
Not that I have the answers to all these questions, by the way. I'm not an expert. The only thing I have is like probably more experience hanging out with this age group than most people.
It's such a delight to see you perform and to be here in this space. And yes, thank you for all the magic.
Thank you.
That's the tuning fork effect. It's the tuning fork effect. We're going to do a little product placement here.
Oh, really? We're not going to take a question from Gordon?
I was going to offer at the onset to say that the Institute for Cultural Activism is a little too limiting when you say international. It should be more like, you know, global or solar. You know, I don't know what works for Galaxy, but that might be a little pretentious and asking a little much, but definitely global. You know, be modest, but global. Yeah. That said, you know, thank you so much for everything that you've shared, Celeste. I do kind of want to respond to Gina along with the hello. I do think that, you know, I think from my experience in addressing individuals who no longer exist in a binary, or at least in my own understanding, whether it's aesthetically, physically, spiritually, what have you, I always start by acknowledging that I may be in error, that it is not personal or meant to be an affront or offensive by any means, and then in all likelihood, I'm going to mess up again. So, but it is about that, or can we move on? If we can move on respectfully, then let's do. Otherwise, I think we're missing the point because we're getting caught up in silos, which is something I want to get to, that don't or shouldn't exist. The quick points that I want to try to throw out to you, Celeste, because there's so much here, and it's almost unfair. You shouldn't have taken questions. But that said, I think that one thing that's important is, at least for my work and when I'm working with a lot of different populations, I'm always starting first and foremost with identity, and explaining to them the importance of being able to articulate their own identity as they see it, if only for that moment. And it can change, and it's yours. So own it. Now that we've established that, pat ourselves on the back, let's keep moving. So, and once we're that clear that the person, because otherwise a person is subjected to, other definitions about them that may not be. Mm. And so that's the work there. And the thing that you said that is a little concerning is that, or I want to say a caveat, better yet, the fact that young people are so much more accepting of others, which is commendable. And they're shouldered with the only generation that has actually grown up worse off than their parents and their grandparents. I mean, what they're inheriting from the womb is frightening. It gives one daymares. But while they are that accepting, while they are that fluid, they also exist in silos. They don't really do the interconnection. We acknowledge, yes, you are whatever you say you are, that's fine, that's good, I accept it, I respect you. Well, I'm gonna be over here. It's almost like tolerance, which is a word that I abhor, but and so I share that with you to ask, one, if you've experienced it, if you have, how have you addressed it? How do you continue to address it from, excuse the expression, all sides of the plate?
Yeah, I think that, there is a real need for community, like for actual real-time, real space experiences. Like it is absolutely a necessity that the young people need. And, where I meet young people is in community, whether it's online in these Zooms that we've with young people from all over the country, giving them the opportunity to communicate with each other and with themselves in that community. Or whether it's in real-time, real space in schools and LGBT centers. They desperately need it. And this has been a real challenge for many, many young people to be during the pandemic. But they're also, they've also been incredibly adept at kind of just adjusting to the situation as is. So, there was a beautiful moment when we started doing the workshops on Zoom where I said to the people, to my team, I said, I can't do it. I think I'm too old for this. I've spent too much of my life in real time, real space, in rooms, reading the room. Like I'm really good at reading the room as a professional codependent person. I can pick up on people's feelings in the room, but I didn't think I could do it in these squares. Why and not? Because I only had their head. And I didn't think that I could really do the work of assessing how someone was feeling. And so my co-founder, Ryan, who's much younger than I am, said, okay, you have to do this 2 more times. And if after 2 more times you actually feel that way, then fine, but you have to do it 2 more times. And I was like, ah. So I did it. And the second time I did it, I said, okay, and I was feeling not at all encouraged. But at the end of the workshop, I said, I just want to leave everybody with a quote from one of my favorite writers, James Baldwin. And there were like 20 boxes, right? And about 15 of them, they're all on mute, by the way, right? Because I'm talking, so they're all respectfully on mute. They all put their hands to their heart and went like this. Oh. at the mention of James Baldwin. And I thought, okay, if James Baldwin can make it onto Zoom and cause that feeling and have them be able to express to me how he makes them feel down through the decades and onto this platform, I said, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to actually just pay closer attention. And what happened was they found ways to be able to communicate within this box that astounded me, that I felt older people were not so flexible. So they are desperate to break out of their silos. They're desperate to break out of them. They don't want to be in silos. They want to be in community. They're hardwired for community and connection and creativity. That's what they're hardwired for at that age. And what they need are the formats, at least from my experience, what they need are the formats to be able to do that in a safe environment where they won't be shamed.
I guess one of the things that concerns me in this context is that, okay, my head goes to, we've jettisoned so many people in our civilization out of society, thrown them out. People are, discouraged by religion, by business, by the Me Too movement. I mean, all the things that repel us from what used to be the conventionally admirable aspiration of a society. So we've empowered this, disengagement. At the same time, you have all these divisional sort of things happening. Let's just call it during the Trump era that became so obvious, of these, polarization going on, and the sort of what I notice a kind of acceleration toward fanaticism, cultism, this sort of kind of thing. Now, in the community that you're working with, Celeste, is there a notion that healing can happen in society through the intervention of this new empowered community?
Wow. Do these young people feel like that's possible?
Yeah. Or is there a space where that is in any way, is there a fragrance of it? Is there anything, so it's not just, us and empowering us, but how can we liberate other people of their preoccupations, identities, because now it's up for grabs. Community is redefining redefine what community is and what community does. So just putting it on the table.
Yeah.
I know you have to leave us in a few minutes.
Yeah, I don't really have the answer to that because, these young people, it's not a monolith, right? Like there are young people who are really, let me just say that the Trevor Project, has been around for 23 years. And we know that there are young people who are in crisis still. But what I began to see was that there was this other narrative. And the other narrative was what could happen when these young people have support from one parent who actually thinks they're amazing, and they have like a guidance counselor that loves them, or they have each other, or they have connection through the internet of a world out there beyond their small town community. Like I began to see like another story that was happening that was just hopeful, because young people they're just tilted toward the future. That's just their natural predilection, is to sort of like, they're geared towards making the world different and better. What I felt like I could do was give them a community where they could actually find their own voice. And the more, let's just say what saved me was art. When I was 15 years old, 14 years old, 13 years old, what saved me, regardless of, the things that were going on with my, sexual identity and gender or whatever else, what saved me was the connection to myself through art. to beat that path from my inside to my outside, it is a very beautiful and irrepressible journey that cannot be stopped in this world. It cannot be stopped. Like, and that is the beauty of young people, is that you see it in this form that is so like, they're just like beating a path. They don't know what they're doing. So, you know, we don't train them. We don't teach them how to do art. We just give them the space and the encouragement to just beat that path and like, and beat it and make it loud and make it strong and find your own way of doing it. And in that sense, I can't talk about the whole generation of like, but I can say that that thing is alive and well and kicking. And all of us in the arts I think have a responsibility to turn to those young people and say, just keep doing that. Just keep doing it. It meant the world to me that somebody gave me encouragement when I was 14, 15 years old. I wouldn't be here if somebody hadn't seen me flailing around trying to make value in my little world and encourage me to do that. I think that's true for all of us as artists. Somebody saw us. Somebody heard us. Somebody encouraged us.
Yes. Yeah.
That's my big speech.
And maybe many. Maybe many. Yeah.
You can tell I get very passionate about this.
What is your time constraint, Celeste?
We have 10 more minutes.
Okay. Well, Babette just joined us again from Amsterdam.
Hi, Babette.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait a minute. Vera's holding up something.
Vera has a book
I'm holding up the book that I borrowed from the library, a book I borrowed from the library also at our, higher education institution, because, man, it's full of Foucault and Derrida and, people who really have tried to open doors and at the same time trying to understand what Judith Butler, that you must know as well. Mm-hmm. For me, they're discoveries, but it's a way of saying, me too, as a teacher, I'm a little bit lost with all the potential for genders and whatnot. And I don't, ways people want to be, and I don't want to upset anyone's choices. On the contrary, I want to be able to welcome, but I know that I'm lost in the jargon and what's going on because there's so much going on. And at the same time, I run with others a workshop online that we call Embracing the Unknown and e-spaces of creative encounter. But I've not had to, storytelling, I guess, and about themselves has not come out in that way. And it could be a really interesting thing to do from what you say. And so I think that maybe it's something I have to believe, is that if you encourage that space where people can tell stories and you can open and welcome it, it doesn't matter if you don't know all the theory and you don't know, and you're clumsy, because if you said kind and curious, if there's kindness and curiosity, then the space can open up where things can happen. You don't have to know everything,
No, and as a matter of fact, the young people don't know everything. They certainly don't know everything. And one of the things I learned from my work with the Trevor Project was one of the very first things that we learned when I became a Lifeline counselor was when someone identifies themselves as anything, like, well, I'm, pansexual. The question is, what does that mean to you? Because not everybody's definition is the same, even, right? Like people, it really varies. Like, what does, like, I get that, I heard that you're pansexual, or you said you're pansexual. Can you tell me what that means to you? And then it becomes like, oh, okay, well, it empowers the person to actually speak from their truth, as opposed to these labels, which are, they don't have one meaning. Even the word gay is very like,
yeah, like they might be trying it out. You mean they're also trying out the words. They're trying out, yeah.
Yeah, and what does it mean to them? Like, how do you identify as? How does your identification as pansexual mean? I mean, that's when it gets fun. That's what I mean by curiosity. Like, tell me more.
Celeste, I remember when I was really deeply into yoga in the 80s, learning it, and really like 3, 4, 5 hours a day practicing yoga. My body became so sensitized. I had no idea what am I having a gender conflict or what's going on with me? Because I became so, it felt female, my body became so, and then knowing you at that time was also a little confusing to me because I loved you very much. I didn't know if I should make love with you or like, I wasn't sure what was going on, like, and so, I mean, there I was, a young mid-20s, having these very fluid, tactile experiences in my body that were disorienting,
Oh, great.
Are you sure now? Are you sure now?
We should never be sure. We're never finished making ourselves.
I'm just going with it, Gordon. In therapy,
I just wanted to, would it be okay if I just ended with this very quick thing, which I just want to share with you? One of our workshops was about evolution, because I really believe that queer youth are on the sort of the front lines of changing who we are as a people. And so we put them into the little groups. We had a big discussion and we put them into little groups and we asked them to come up with a recipe for evolution. And I just want to read you really quick the 5 points that this one group came up with, because it's so beautiful. 1, the willingness to change. 2, realize your needs and tend to them. 3, admit you can't do it alone. Ask for help. 4, be willing to start over. And 5, journey to self-love. And I mean, if that isn't like that those were like 15, 16-year-olds, right? Like given the opportunity, given the really handing them and saying like, tell us how to do this.
Yeah.
I love talking with you all today. You're such a wonderful group of people. And I feel so honored that you gave me the space to be able to talk about my passion. And I look forward to hearing about yours, really.
Well, always as the case that this is just, the beginning of encyclopedic contact with each other. I hope also that we are interacting together outside of the box here. It's part of our intention.
Wait a minute, Vera's trying to say something.
Say, can we hold hands and say happy birthday to John?
Yeah.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, John.
Happy birthday. Wow.
What a beautiful blessing.
Thanks
you
for
are.
this gathering on your birthday. It's beautiful.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thanks so much.
I've been crying, almost crying so many times today with so much love and appreciate so much. And so in that case, we'll be seeing each other again.
With pleasure, and it's great to kick off to this new start, John, to part 2.
And by the way, Emily Harris and I are now married.
I think I heard that from Max, so congratulations as well. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Okay.
We'll see you all soon, and Margaret and Babette will be with you in Amsterdam in about 2 weeks.
Wow.
Very much looking forward to that.
Well, I hope that we can sort of maybe find a way of meeting up, because we didn't last time. So maybe we're a train ride away. Keep us posted.
Train ride away.
Are you in Paris?
Yeah.
Come over.
Exactly.
It's only 3 hours, 3-4 hours.
I know. Just keep us posted so we know, what to do.
Love you so much, all of you.
But congratulations. I thought I heard that, but I didn't see anything about it. So that's beautiful news. Thank you.
A little light, in the darkness.
All the best.
Big light. Bye, everybody.
Love you.
Bye.
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 Cheers, everyone. Good to see you again.